This is Fight Fans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh, my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. Episode 179 of The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself on this Valentine's Day Eve?
Oh, man, a little heartbroken because Rashad got hurt, to be honest. I'm not his biggest fan, but I was, really waiting for that fight to go down, man.
Yeah, me too, but I felt bad for Daniel Cormier since he had to drop all that weight, had to sacrifice all that good food to cut the 205, and now he has to fight some unknown fighters, so it's kind of a bummer.
Jay, I don't feel that bad. That dude needed it. I don't care how good of a shape. He was kind of big.
Well, nevertheless, we'll get to that later on, but on today's show, we'll break down that incident pretty much with Daniel Cormier and Rashad Evans. We'll preview this card that's coming up April 4th, Legacy FC. We'll break that down with Holly Holm in the main event. We'll also preview this weekend's UFC Fight Night card. But first, Jorge, we have a guest.
Yes, joining us, he is a flyweight from Jackson's MMA here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He sports a record of 7-1. Nick Urso, who will be fighting April 4th on that Legacy card you just mentioned. How you doing, Nick?
What's up, fellas? How you guys doing?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Now, April 4th, man, Legacy, you're making the jump to a pretty big promotion. What's this ride been since you've moved to New Mexico and now you're fighting in a decent big league organization?
Well, I'd say it's definitely been a roller coaster since I first came out here, but it's been a fun ride, man. I'm excited where I'm at, and I feel like I earned this spot, and I'm just really excited to see where it goes from here.
Now, your opponent, you're being matched up with Ray Borg, who's undefeated. He's a younger guy. He's 5-0 out of Fit NHB here in Albuquerque. What do you feel about fighting, one of the probably better prospects that you've taken on so far in your career?
Yeah, I'd definitely say this is probably my toughest fight of my career, but this is what I'm here for. I'm not trying to fight easy guys, I got 8 pro fights. I've been doing this for a little while, full time. I'm pretty confident with my skills, about as confident as you can be with where I'm at, and I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a good fight and a good display of my skills.
Hi, Nick. This is Justin Goodrum here. Can you kind of describe this fight in terms of the hype? Southwest Fight did an article about 3 weeks ago describing yourself against Ray Borg as one of the most anticipated fights really happening in the Albuquerque area for a while. Do you feel any of the extra pressure, the little expectations that the local fans here of how much fight this fight's really getting a lot of attention? Do you feel any extra kind of pressure going into this one?
I always feel like there's pressure. I always put pressure on myself. I don't think it necessarily changes with what's going on. It could be in the backyard of my house or in front of 50,000 people. I'm going to expect to perform to a certain standard, and that's just how it's always been for me.
We talk about this fight card that you're on is going to be broadcasted live on Access TV. Again, Legacy FC 30 there on April 4th. The card is pretty loaded up top, especially now you're fighting alongside some teammates in Holly Holm and Donald Sanchez. What's it like to lead into a fight with them when your fight is likely going to be, more than likely fight of the night?
Yeah, man, it's awesome. It's I said at the press conference, I think we're going to steal the show. And then I looked over at Holly and I was like, we'll steal the show until she gets up there. But, it's a stacked card from top to bottom. We got a bunch of tough amateurs on there. The beginning of the pro card, my roommate Clint's on there. It's just going to be an exciting card. And I think the flyweights, the small guys, we get in there and we seem to steal the show a little bit.
You mentioned the flyweights. What do you think about the flyweight scene here in New Mexico? Obviously, the top dog is John Dodson, who's your teammate. But what do you think of some of the competition that is out there if you fight it throughout the state?
Yeah, like the Southwest Fight News article a few months back about the flyweight fantasy tournament. That in itself shows the talent that's out here. The talent pool is real deep, and just across the board, a bunch of different gyms have, high level flyweights, and I think it's awesome. It's a good way to represent the local area and develop the weight class at a higher level.
Hey, Nick, so when we have guests on the show, we like to ask them the origins of getting into mixed martial arts. So can you just give a little bit of a background on how you got into the sport and what really captivated you to really pursue this as a full-time career?
Well, like I said, obviously I'm a flyweight. I'm not the biggest dude, and growing up I was always the smallest guy, and my dad is an old-school boxer from Chicago, and instead of tossing around the football in the front yard, we were doing footwork drills and, jab drills and, all kinds of kickboxing drills and wrestling and swing around nunchucks and swords and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's really, I always say I'm born and bred to do this, and it's pretty true, not to sound cliche, but, I was growing up watching Bruce Lee movies, not, football. And just one thing led to another. I started training with my dad again. We hadn't trained in like 3 or 4 years, and we decided to start training together. And, I just fell back in love with it. When I was a kid, it was more like a chore, and as an adult doing it, it was just, it became a passion almost instantly. And then I started mixing it up with some grapplers locally, started finding more gyms in Tampa, and I just fell in love and kind of just, usually when I do things, it's either 120% or not at all, and this one was like 240%.
As you mentioned, you grew up in Florida. What made you move to New Mexico, or when did that light switch just hit you and say, you know what, I got to make the move to Albuquerque, to Jackson's? And how did you even get in touch with the gym? How did that whole relationship build?
Yeah, well, like I said, I do things 240% when I'm really, interested and intrigued. And I was going to, 4 and 5 different gyms, all, 50 miles away one way just to get some good training. And I was falling in love with it, but I was just so hungry for a really high-level MMA gym. And Jackson just was the natural fit. They were killing it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They'd just been on top of the game for a long time. And I just got on the website, sent an email to Ricky Consteady, general manager, said I was interested in coming out. And me and my little brother, actually, we came out here for a week. And me and little John hit it off from day one. And as I say, the rest is history. I've just been coming back nonstop. And now I live here full time. And
how do you like the state and the city so far, man?
I mean, it's definitely got it's a little different than Florida, but it's a nice change, when I go back to Florida or if I go on vacation to see my family in Chicago, I would say I'm a snowbird in training. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be at what time of the year. But going back and forth from Florida to Albuquerque it's awesome, man. I really enjoy it.
Can you describe what makes the Jackson's MMA gyms, so special? I mean, a lot of Greg Jackson has this aura around him of being, they call him the Yoda of MMA. What really sets him apart from other gyms out there, other coaches out there in the MMA community?
Well, we got a good balance. Greg is really, he's a guru and he's real cerebral. And then we got Wink, and he's just an old school, hard ass, really. The mesh of them two it seems to be the magic key. And then we got, like 20 people from the UFC at the gym. It's just hard not to get good there,
What were some of the difficulties you had when you first moved here? Obviously, you're away from family, you're away from friends, you're in a whole new place where, a lot of people only speak Spanish, man. How was that change?
All right. Well, the toughest part was I was living in the dorms of the gym. A lot of people don't really know this, but I lived in the dorms of the gym for almost 3 years.
Oh, wow.
To this date, I was in the dorms longer than anybody ever. And when I was up there was, no laundry. I didn't have my car out here. I was kind of scraping by with money. I was here by myself. We had random people up in the dorms that I'd be living with. So I'm living with people I don't even know their first names. We got a Foreman grill in our living room and our bedroom. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's a unique experience, but really it's molded who I am and my character, and just just a lot about me has been established through living in the gym. Really, just the grind of that lifestyle, going from kind of a bougie lifestyle in Florida, just working in an office and having a nice car and good weather and a good job. It was just really an easy life in Florida, and then I came out here and I was like, what the hell did I get myself into? But but it was I wouldn't change it for the world. It's really molded who I am, and it's developed me as a person as well as a fighter, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Now I'm curious, what became your go-to meal on that George Foreman grill? Because not everything. I know, you can't cook everything. I mean, you can't make some of those fine Italian meals you were probably used to back home, man.
Right. Well, the Foreman grill was good until you realized there was 9 people in there using it, every day. So I was just disgusted by the thing. I would just go to Subway. There's a Subway. Like I said, I had no car, and Subway's right down the street. I'd eat Subway twice a day every day for a long time, and that was getting ridiculous. I go to Walmart, and I was eating like crap when I was living in the dorms. When I look back on it now, I was like, man, what the heck was I doing? I was eating, frozen meals and whatever really would keep me from being hungry. Ramen noodles was a go-to, as all, college students or people with not a lot of money understand.
Tell people about that Walmart that's there, man, because if I had to explain it, it was if Oakland hung out with the ghetto part of Houston for like 3 hours in Chicago. That is the craziest place I've ever been to, I think.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they got that. What is that website? People of Walmart. I swear it's just People of Albuquerque Walmart. San Mateo and Central. That is the most ghetto Walmart. Not only ghetto. You got all the most random people. I swear half the people have been abducted before. I walk through there and I'm like, what is going on? Just look around. It's almost comical, really. We'd get bored in the dorms. We'd walk over to Walmart just to people watch a little bit, keep ourselves entertained and occupied.
That's hilarious.
You have to experience it yourself to get to really see what we're talking about.
You know what? That's one of the things people ought to do, I think, in life. Check out the Northern Lights up in the Arctic and go to that Walmart there. And there on 7 Tell.
Rite of passage.
It is a rite of passage. Well, Nick, it was a pleasure to have you on, man. Again, April 4th, Legacy here in Albuquerque at Route 66 Casino. We'll have information regarding tickets posted up. Man, is there anyone you'd like to thank or shout out some of your sponsors?
Yeah, I don't know if my mom's listening. It's a little late in Florida, but if you're listening, I just want to thank my mom as always. Always got to give her the main shout out. She's my main supporter. I would say she was there in the trenches with me through everything. I want to give shout out to all my friends in Florida, family in Chicago, just all my sponsors, everybody that helps me get to where I'm at right now. My homie EJ Roberts, Buffalo man. He's a good supporter of mine, good friend of mine, and just want to give a special shout out to him. Just everybody that's listening, I appreciate you guys. You guys know who you are. And thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. Hey, your Twitter, what is it?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nick Urso MMA, or you can find me on Facebook, just Nick Urso, URSO. Give me some followers. I'm slacking in the gym.
Oh, no,
man. All these superstars, they got 20, 30,000 followers. I can't even break 1,000.
We got to get that, man. We got to get you to build a fan page, too, man.
Right. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to ever convert to a fan page. I think the social media is tapped out with things. I can't make another one. Then I'll really do bad.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure, Nick. Hopefully we can get you back on or do a couple of interviews and post you up on the YouTube page here as the fight comes about, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. You guys have a good night, and thanks for having me.
All right, take care, man.
You too. Thank you.
Take it easy.
He's a martial artist in like the truest form, it sounds like, man.
Yeah, no doubt. And that just continues just the strength of that character in that gym. A lot of people were kind of wondering, how long is Jackson's MMA really going to stay on top? And each year you question them, they continue to be, if not the number one gym in all of combat sports.
There's one thing I wanted to run by you, Justin. I think it's so difficult in MMA, I think, to keep up with a lot of these prospects. I thought about in boxing, and boxing usually, I think 15 fights. If you go 15-0, that's when people really start looking at you as far as your record. It's difficult, I think, for a lot of these guys to come out of where they're coming from. They're 7-1, 5-0, maybe as Ray Borges and Nick's opponent's case. It's just very interesting to see how guys develop in MMA out of these farm leagues, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think with mixed martial arts, it's a lot of these guys train at high-level gyms all together compared to boxing where it's kind of spread out. We have sparring partners. And, with MMA, you really develop relationships with your teammates, and it's more of it's more of like a work environment, Like you work in a job and you get to know your peers and your coworkers. And boxing is kind of more secular where you're just kind of by yourself. So I think with MMA, you see a lot of more high-level just training immediately because they're training with the best every time. I want to ask you, Jorge, in terms of this legacy card, there's been all sorts of rumors about Holly Holm's future. She's fighting a very tough opponent against Juliana Werner for the inaugural women's bantamweight title. I remember really kind of laughing at this title fight, saying they're just making up this belt for Holly Holm to win. But I have to say, at least it's for legacy. At least it's a real MMA organization. Before this, I was hearing some rumors that this card was just going to be some random MMA card. Instead, at least it's for legacy. That makes a lot more sense. But where exactly can you frame this Holly Holm fight in terms of her going to the UFC, her going to Invicta, in terms of legacy, forming their own women's division? I mean, what does this fight really mean for Holly Holm, whether she wins or loses?
Well, I mean, whether she loses, it's everything. You could kiss a UFC contract within, I guess, the next 6 months out the window, just because people expect her to win this fight. People expect her to win in her hometown. There's a lot of eyes, and people think, oh, Holly Holm, she's undefeated. She's been through this before. I feel there's a lot of pressure on her despite that, just because, as we mentioned, she is fighting in her hometown. She's fighting a fighter that's relatively unknown and not a whole lot of tape on as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't really find anything on Juliana Werner. So, I mean, this is Holm's chance to really, I guess, establish herself as a legitimate prospect. And yeah, it might be a belt. They obviously made it up. Odds are because it was her. And, this belt never existed before, this bantamweight title for Legacy FC. But for them to create a belt for a fighter, I mean, that's at least saying something. Just here we're used to her notoriety and how popular she is. But, it's good that nationally she's starting to get recognized, even if they may have just made up this belt just for her.
Yeah, I agree. And in the card, I think it's really reflective of the talent that Bellator has used in the past. There's a lot of Bellator names on here that they've used on the undercard, such as Adrian Cruz, Lenny Lovato, Mikey Lovato. And, of course, we have, you mentioned Donald Sanchez before the show, before we went on the air here, and he's going to be in the co-main event. So definitely a card of local talent. Really, I think it's good to see that. I know it's kind of a thing you don't like, Jorge, have two, New Mexican fighters going up against each other, but I think still should be a very entertaining night come April the 4th.
And people better not sleep on one fight that's going to be televised. That Clint Roberts and Martin Sano. Clint Roberts out of Jackson's MMA, as we heard Nick say, his roommate, against Martin Sano, who's a tough dude out of El Paso, out of Bushido's MMA gym. He actually spent a couple of months out with Nick Diaz's camp, and apparently they were boys. He had Facebook pictures with him and Melendez chilling out and working out, man. So don't sleep on that Clint Roberts-Martin Sano fight.
Exactly, that's right. So you can get in touch with the show, of course, through our social media outlets. We are on Twitter, of course, at The Low Blow. We're also on Facebook through Low Blow Podcast, and we're available on Spreaker, Stitcher, and on iTunes. Of course, you can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Ustream, and Spreaker. And, of course, you can follow our YouTube videos, youtube.com/lowblow505 that has a little bit of an interview with Bob Foster. And in the next couple of weeks, I know we've been promising this, but I think this weekend I'll put up an interview that myself and Jorge did with Austin Trout, just talking about the African-American presence in the combat sports. So that will be up this weekend. And also in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a lot of the Bob Foster interview. World champion Bob Foster, we had a chance to sit down with him. So I think we'll work it out. We'll try to post as much of that interview as possible, unedited, on our, different audio outlets, Stitcher, Spreaker, and on iTunes. So, man, instead of doing this kind of the normal standing 8 count, I want to run down some of the major news, and that really concerns UFC 170, the co-main event. Rashad Evans, pretty much known to be injury prone. No shock here. Had to pull out of a fight against Daniel Cormier. A leg injury knocked out Evans. Looks like they found a replacement for Daniel Cormier, so that fight for Daniel's not canceled, so he'll still be able to be on that card. But just a really disappointing end for Cormier, considering he was dropping down from heavyweight. The specifics of the leg injury is not revealed. However, the UFC got the news from Kevin Iole, and according to Lorenzo Fertitta, Evans would not require surgery, but would need a month of rehab. So it's kind of the same old song with Rashad Evans, gets hurt and has to, fight later on. If I'm Daniel Cormier, I'm very angry at this point, considering this is the first time he has to fight at 205.
No, and I'd be completely angry as well. And we mentioned, and I kind of joked about it earlier. Nonetheless, I mean, Daniel Cormier is an elite freaking athlete. He's one of my favorite mixed martial artists, and even though he's coming down from heavyweight, the guy's in shape either way. And for him to be making this move just shows how much he's committed to, one, his friend, Cain Velasquez, not fighting him at heavyweight, and how determined he is to actually make some noise in this 205 weight class. And to me, to be honest, this was his coming out party against Rashad. If he were to put one hell of a performance on, it was going to open some eyes, just because Rashad has been known to, relatively known in the mainstream. So Daniel Cormier's name, I think, was going to be officially built at this point. So very disappointing that Cormier and Rashad isn't going down. And it just makes you wonder if you want to spend those, $65 to see that Rousey and McMahon card.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And looks like Cormier has an opponent. He's going to fight Pat Cummings. Not really an enticing co-main event. It's kind of a little bit of a disappointment. But I think you're right, Jorge, and it just comes down to the sport. It's just, guys get hurt, and that's what happens. I mean, there's really nothing the UFC can do. But I will say, barring, Cormier taking this fight seriously, I think certainly a future opponent could be Phil Davis against Anthony Rumble Johnson. I think the winner of that fight could be aligned to fight Daniel Cormier. I think that could be a great matchup down the line if everybody stays healthy.
Now, is there any word on who's coming on board to replace Rashad, or is it just that they've found an opponent?
They found an opponent. His name is Pat Cummings. In fact, he posted on his Twitter,
that's right.
Quote,
okay.
We have a fight. DC will face me at UFC 170. It's on. Been a long time coming. He's pretty excited. He's 4-0. He served as the training partner of Jason Miller. This seems like, even though we don't know too much about this guy, this is a very dangerous fight for Daniel Cormier. If he kind of dismisses him or is uninterested because Rashad Evans pulled out of the fight, bad things could happen. So I'm just hoping that Cormier uses his rage to just destroy Patrick Cummings. I mean, no disrespect to him, but hopefully he channels his anger in the right way, or else this can be a massive upset. As you know, in MMA, anything can happen. I mean, that's not just a catchphrase or something people just say. That's really the truth.
How bad would it derail him, do you think, if he did lose to this guy?
It'd be a terrible loss, and I think there'd be a lot of people questioning his weight cut, because really it's unknown, A, if he can make it to 205. We really don't know. B, really don't know if he can retain a lot of what made him great at heavyweight, being so quick and yet having that power, being kind of a stocky guy. And at 205, we really don't have the answer to that question. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Cormier was on doing the pregame show for the last UFC pay-per-view. He didn't look that different to me in terms of cutting weight. So, I mean, it kind of just depends on how he's going to be. I mean, this is the first time he's doing this. I guess the good thing is, if this weight cut is terrible, he's facing an opponent that is way less skilled than him. So he can maybe, get away with stuff that he couldn't against Rashad Evans. That could be a blessing, or it could be a curse with him getting, losing to a upstart. So we'll see. I don't expect Cormier to do that. I think he's way too professional, and just the gym that he trains at, I don't think that'll really happen. But you never know, man.
Yeah, and we go from a decent fight there in the UFC to a big fight that's going to happen in boxing, and some interesting words expressed by the champion Sergio Martinez this week. Sergio Martinez, if you didn't heard, he did say that when he knocks out Cotto, he's going to start focusing on Golovkin. Both comments, meaning knocking out Cotto and, fighting Golovkin, just drove boxing fans crazy this week, excuse me. Martinez hasn't fought since April 2013, but the reigning middleweight champion has Miguel Cotto scheduled for June 7th. Cotto, of course, is coming out of an amazing performance against Delvin Rodriguez, and Sergio Martinez and Gennady Golovkin is a fight that people have wanted to see for a while now. Gennady Golovkin, of course, the other top kingpin at the 160-pound division. And Sergio Martinez's quote was exactly as this: "When I beat Cotto by knockout, I can just concentrate on what might be possible in the fight with Golovkin. He is the most difficult opponent. He's not the most difficult because of his technique, but for his physical strength. And then he goes on to say, this is the time to fight him because in a few years, he will have more experience and he will be more dangerous, close quote. And the opposite for Martinez, who's 51-2-2 right now, can also be said. He's on the downside of his career. So both fights against Cotto, who's on the downside, and Golovkin, who has the most positive upside out of 99% of boxers out there, are two huge fights for Martinez. Now, I have a question for you, Jay. Do you think Sergio Martinez can knock out Cotto?
Oh, man, that's awfully tough. Miguel Cotto's an underrated boxer, and it's weird because he's really somewhat known for his craftsmanship in the ring, but with Miguel Cotto, he kind of gets put into this kind of slugger, just kind of bruiser category, which is not really accurate. I don't see that happening. Even though Martinez will probably be the bigger guy, correct? Just in terms of if they're both side by side. Correct. No, I don't think. I mean, you would know better than I am, but just based on, I had to guess, I would say no. Miguel Cotto can take a lot of punishment. Do you see that happening?
The only thing I could think of Martinez stopping him is by cuts. I don't think he'll clearly knock him out because Cotto has never been really knocked out. We talk about, think about who probably did the biggest number on him. It was Margarito, who probably cheated. Yeah, probably did cheat, let's just say. And then Manny Pacquiao, who had incredible speed and power. Miguel Cotto doesn't have the speed, and I don't think he has the power that Manny Pacquiao can actually pack. But, it's just for Sergio Martinez, doesn't have that speed or power, but I think he's slick enough to cut Cotto, and, the fight might stop there in the middle rounds. If I had to pick between the two right now, I think I'd slightly lean with Martinez just because at the weight it's happening at. I mean, Cotto's big as it is at 154 pounds. I mean, we all remember how slow he was against Austin Trout. It's the same fight, I think, to me.
Yeah, man, but I really think, Sergio Martinez versus Gennady Golovkin, that's a wonderful fight. I mean, it is. The negative would be the hype because Martinez has been so inactive and Golovkin's still on the rise in terms of being, a huge draw, even though he does well with ratings on HBO. In terms of really giving that fight what it deserves in terms of hype, I think it'd be somewhat of a disappointment on pay-per-view if it's worth to be put on there. But I think that's a pay-per-view worthy fight just in terms of quality. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. But what are your predictions of that ever happening, if he gets past Cotto?
If he gets past Cotto, it'll definitely happen, and I think that's where Golovkin will start his reign as one of the top 3 pound-for-pound guys in boxing, I think. I think Golovkin's power is just too much for Sergio Martinez. We've seen Sergio struggle his last 4 fights. I think 4 of his last 4 fights, he's been down at least once, and Golovkin's power, I don't think is anything Sergio Martinez has ever dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. I just think the heart of, Martinez and just, everything that Golovkin offers, that's a wonderful fight. Mm-hmm. I guess let's move on to 2 rounds. It's our segment where we discuss the hottest topics in mixed martial arts. Anything that's really bugging you, Jorge? It's been kind of a somewhat quiet week in both sports.
It has been a quiet week, and the thing that bugged me is, I guess that's been on my mind, and, there's just a lot of things to consider when it does come to, I guess, injuries and pay-per-views. You talk about boxing. Those cards usually aren't as loaded. Obviously, boxing, it's a lot more unlikely that guys get hurt when it comes to these pay-per-view cards. I mean, when's the last time you remembered a big pay-per-view card or a pay-per-view card being postponed because of injury? It's just, it's food for thought here just of how much strain does go into mixed martial artists' bodies, man, whether it's the wrestling, whether it's the kickboxing, anything. They're just so much more susceptible to injury, and it's just crazy. And when people get upset, they have the right to be upset that their fighter or a good fight is not coming off, but I just think they need to keep in mind of how much more, I guess, at risk an MMA fighter is than the boxer to actually get hurt because of the different maneuvers or holds that they're actually put in. That's something that really hit me just when I saw a lot of forums with people losing their mind that Rashad Evans got hurt. I mean, poor dude, he's human,
Yeah, it's tough, man. One, Rashad Evans, a lot of people don't like him, and it's kind of weird. I mean, it's just Rashad Evans really, I think, gets a bad rap from the MMA community sometimes. So I think a lot of that's just because they just don't like the guy. And I think also is your perspective. I mean, I come from a perspective of following a lot of combat sports, and that includes professional wrestling, which is a lot of the time sucks. And so I think when somebody gets hurt in MMA, I'm a lot more understanding. It's like, yeah, it's out of their control. There's really nothing they can do compared to a lot of times the garbage you see in pro wrestling, which is just, it's terrible. I think the tolerance to me with MMA is just like, I'm willing to accept it. I'm a lot more understanding of it. Maybe if, I didn't have any kind of connection to pro wrestling, I'd be a little bit more frustrated with MMA. But I don't know. I think a lot of fans, they're just mad because they got that fight taken away from them. I don't think they really see these fighters, sadly, as people. They kind of see them as just commodities, as just draws, and it's just kind of frustrating. So, this is one of those things, mostly because I just think why Rashad Evans is just getting all this hate is because he's just not likable from the MMA community. I guess my point, I don't know, it's been kind of a weird week, and I guess we can kind of go into it. It kind of leads into the whole Gilbert Melendez situation, and that's with Dana White. Apparently, negotiations with Gilbert Melendez and Dana White did not go so well, and it seems like Melendez is going to be a free agent. Here's the quote from Dana White, quote, "I'm done. It's not going well, and I couldn't care less at this point. I like Gilbert Melendez very much. I just don't like his management. If Gilbert Melendez wants to fight in the UFC, he better call Lorenzo Fertitta quickly. But he should also probably start looking elsewhere." And that seems weird, man. Just, I don't know. There's 2 points here. There's one point of really, there's no leverage for Gilbert Melendez, and you feel bad for him. At the same time, you have to wonder, where is he going to go? And you brought up earlier, Jorge, with Melendez, he fought all this time of being in Strikeforce and always complaining of, I want to fight the big guys in the UFC. He finally gets there, and he has to leave because, he's not worthy of the money. In terms of big money deal, in my opinion, I think in terms of talent, I think Melendez is certainly worthy, but in terms of being a draw, he's not. And I think the two go hand in hand. You don't get paid for how good you are. You get paid for if you're a big draw. That's just the truth. I mean, if guys were paid and how good they are, Demetrius Johnson, Benson Henderson, I mean, they'd be making millions hand over fist, but that's not how it works. You're out there to sell tickets. And as harsh as I've said this a million times, and I think it's true, these fighters, they're also products. They're out there to sell pay-per-views. And with Melendez, he's very exciting. He fought Diego Sanchez, but really, if you talk to really casual MMA fans, despite having, a fight of the year candidate with Diego Sanchez, I mean, if you put Gilbert Melendez in a lineup with all these other guys of the same type of caliber, in front of casual UFC fans, I don't think they'd be able to point him out, to be honest. I think he'd be on the lower end just because, he's a nice guy. He's not really that colorful of a personality in terms of a fight style. A lot of people, even though I think me and you like the fight with him and Benson Henderson, a lot of people didn't like that fight. A lot of people think he's kind of boring, which is insane, but he kind of has that kind of demeanor, which he falls in that same category as Benson Henderson as being kind of boring, which is not really true. So I guess where does Melendez go from here? I mean, can Bellator afford him? Does he go to ONE FC? What's his name? You know who I'm talking about? Former welterweight champion Ben Askren. There we go. Yeah. Does he go to ONE FC like Ben Askren? I mean, where does Melendez go from here? He has really no leverage. I mean, where exactly can he go?
He's stuck in the middle. He's a guy that's too good to be in any of those other organizations, I think.
Yes, correct.
His place is the UFC. That's why I don't necessarily think this is the last we've heard of this. I think Gilbert's management might backtrack on the contract, accept a lesser deal for their fighter, and do what's best for him, just because I couldn't picture him making more money anywhere else. I mean, take less money, bring in that sponsorship money for yourself. His team's going to have to take a hit, I think, because that's what the best thing for his career is. He can't afford to go to ONE FC or, God forbid, World Series of Fighting, let's just say, for instance.
Yeah.
And, he gets John Fitched, let's say, for instance. It's too much of a risk for him to actually do that. And for the UFC, I guess, I mean, his demands must be something that Dana does not want to hear at all. But if Dana wants to try to build the fan base within the Mexican American community, this is one of the top 4 or 5 guys that he needs in that. I mean, he needs Kane, he needs Sanchez, he needs Melendez, I think, as some of those guys to help build that brand there within that community.
Well, it's perplexing because Melendez, I mean, he was on Fox Sports doing the pregame shows. He was on ESPN several times. Yep. He was getting a lot of opportunities because of his affiliation with the UFC. So now that's gone. When he's not fighting, I'm sure he gets paid for that appearance, or at least minimum gets the exposure on primetime ESPN television. That can't really hurt him. And so to me, if he goes to Bellator, I mean, look what the situation with Eddie Alvarez. Look at all the crap he had to go through, and now Melendez wants to be put in that same category. I mean, it's just, to me, I agree with you, Jorge. I think he goes back to the UFC. I just don't really think he has anywhere else to go, unfortunately. And I think whether that's a good or bad thing, that's really up to you. But I just think for now, he'll probably just sit on the sidelines for a little bit and then negotiate some deal where he's back.
What do you think? I wanted to ask you, as far as his importance to the UFC, is he in your list of the top, I guess, 20, 25 most important fighters for the organization right now, of course?
That's difficult to say, man, just because, I mean, in terms of 20, yeah, I think so. Now, in terms of draws,
probably not. Yeah.
Well, you say that, but but they've taken a hit with a lot of these guys retiring. I mean, you look at Chris Lieben. I mean, you can bash Chris Lieben, you can hate on the guy all you want to, but the guy drew ratings. I mean, when he fought Uriah Hall, his last fight, that was the highest rated fight they ever drew on there. Mm-hmm. Higher than any of the fight nights. That was because Chris Lieben was on there. So he's gone. I mean, a lot of the big notable names, Stephan Bonner, Forrest Griffin. I mean, I can go down the line here of all the names. I mean, all those names are gone. I mean, you take a look at the lightweight division right now. You take him away, who else is left? TJ Grant. I mean, who hasn't fought? Josh Thompson, I guess. I mean, a lot of these guys on the lightweight division. I mean, lightweight, it's weird because that division is usually known for being, so stacked, but really, it's a weak division. I mean, let's just be honest here. Other than the top maybe 5 guys, you take a look, a lot of the guys are kind of older. They're kind of, past their prime. I mean, there's question marks about Cerrone, about Miller, about Maynard. I mean, Barbosa was considered really a rising prospect. He loses. You have the 2 Russians. There are question marks for now. So basically, you have a lot of either prospects or guys kind of on the decline in that division. Melendez is very important, and he could easily become the champion because of his skill set. But in terms of him being a draw, I would say no. It's tough. It's difficult because he's important to that division, but at the same time, it wouldn't really hurt the UFC if he leaves. At least in terms of like a money, in terms of financially. Now, in terms of credibility, it would hurt them, but in terms of them on the bottom line, I highly doubt it.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. And I wanted to touch base on something that happened on Monday night, just because I think it's pretty important, especially for our local area.
Yes.
Fidel Maldonado Jr. fought on Monday Night Boxing. He was the main event against the late replacement John Nader. Fidel looked his timing looked a little bit off, but guess what? He still stopped the guy at the end of the 4th round. He didn't come out for the 5th, so it goes down as a TKO victory. Don't look, but Fidel Maldonado is 18-2 with 15 knockouts. Man, he's making some noise as of right now. BoxRec has him top 10 in the United States in light welterweight, and he's top 25 in the world as far as that weight class as well. So, it's a shame that the fight with Steve Forbes didn't go down, because if he did this to Steve Forbes, I think a lot of people would be paying attention, especially if he did that to Steve Forbes, a former world champion. But nonetheless, I mean, Fidel Maldonado Jr. is making some noise, and he's doing it on national TV, man.
Yeah, it's too bad that happened, but nevertheless, I'm glad he got the victory. And in fact, that fight's on YouTube, so we'll post that fight if it's still on there. Hopefully, we'll post it on our Facebook page. That fight in its entirety is on there. That's how I actually watched it. So we'll go please and check that out once the show's over. Let's preview this UFC Fight Night 36 card. It's on the same night as the slam dunk contest of the NBA, so that poses a huge problem for me. But, this is an interesting card. The main event's really good. The Yoto Machida fighting Gegard Mousasi. This is a great fight. A pivotal fight, and really could be a number 1 contendership bout for either guy if they get the victory here. Machida, you know how he is, man. If you don't really come forward and you're not aggressive, Machida does not care. He'll take a boring victory. With Mousasi, what can he do to close the distance and not allow Machida just to leg kick him and just get a boring 5-round decision? What can Gegard do to kind of close the distance and make this into kind of a dark fight and maybe kind of pressure Lyoto in making a mistake?
I guess what he knows best is to kickbox, but to do it in close is going to have to be dirty boxing, Jay, because he can't take this fight to the ground. It's going to be very difficult if they go down to the ground, and I don't think Mousasi is going to be able to hang with Machida down on the ground. It's going to have to be something like that where he does initiate the action, but not too much of a distance, because I think where Lyoto is obviously more dangerous is the mid-range accuracy that the guy possesses. I mean, in his last fight, he had one of the knockouts of the year against Mark Munoz, if you ask me. But that mid-range to long-range distance, I don't think it's a good idea for Mousasi, even though he comes from a pretty damn good kickboxing background.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because Mousasi's not even ranked on the middleweight rankings on the UFC website. He is not on there. But I think this is an interesting fight. I have a bad feeling this fight might suck. So the slam dunk contest has a loaded field this year, so you might want to turn to TNT once this main event goes down. I'm just being honest. But hopefully that's not the case, and this fight's awesome. But it really is at a weird start time, too. It's 8:30 Mountain Time, so maybe the dunk contest. See,
that's what I don't understand. Is it because of the whole NBA All-Star festivities? What do you think the issue is? Maybe it's an issue there in Brazil? I mean, what do you think it is that start time?
That's a good question. Really weird. And maybe because if it's on a Saturday night, kind of like a UFC pay-per-view, you want to get started on a similar time frame, I guess. Maybe that's why. But you're right. It's still kind of weird. Also features a main event, Francis Garmon against Renato Jacare Souza. I'm not really a fan of Garmon, honestly. He's very similar to Philippou, just another overrated guy to me. I think Jacare, you know what my feelings were when Luke Rockhold fought Philippou. I feel the same way about this fight. I think Jacare is going to beat this guy. The only thing is Garmon's very built. He's a very rock-solid guy. So I can see him forcing his size on Jacare, but Jacare is he's a boa constrictor, and messing with him on the ground is just highly dangerous. I see this as a simple victory for Jacare, a spectacular submission victory. Do you see any way that Francis proves me wrong here, Jorge?
No, not at all. There's one sports book that has Jacare as high as a 6 or a 7.5 to 1 underdog. I'm looking now. Oh my God, it's just unbelievable. It's pretty spread out for the most part. He's between a 4 to 5 to 1 underdog, and I think don't mess with Vegas on this one. Don't. I don't think he doesn't have a chance. I mean, as far as I know, who knows? I mean, like you said earlier, anything can happen in MMA, but Jacare, I think it'd be too much for Carmont. And does it feel like these 4 guys have not fought in a really long time? Obviously, Machida is probably the most recent, but his action was only for what, 1 round?
Yeah.
His last outing, it just feels like it's been a year plus since all these guys have fought, but it's actually been within 8-9 months, I think. Yeah,
it's definitely been a while. I mean, you saw Jacare Souza, he fought Yushin Okami. That was, September 4th, 2013. You take a look at Francis Garmon here. I'm on the UFC website here. It says he fought Philippou September 21st, and probably a terrible fight. No disrespect, but I don't know. I'm just not a fan of these 2 guys. It's the same thing with Yushin Okami. It's not really the UFC forcing these guys. It's like the MMA community that's forcing these guys down people's throats and trying to con people that they're good. And I mean, they're stable places. They're stable fighters in the division that are not going to be fighting for the title. I just hate it when they like to hype up these guys as possible contenders when they're not. And it's just irritating to me. But nevertheless, you have 4 middleweights in the mix. I guess that's a good thing. Also, Eric Silva's on this card too. Andy Ogle takes on Charles Oliveira. That should be a very entertaining fight. The prelim cards, interesting enough, are going to be on UFC Fight Pass. They're not going to be on Fox Sports 1. That's fairly interesting there. So if you want to watch the prelims, you have to sign up for the free trial of UFC Fight Pass, which only has about a couple of weeks left on the free trial there. Any other fight that really captivates you, man, gets you going?
This one super prospect on the card, the very first fight of the night, showcases Douglas Silva de Andrade. He's 22-0, Jay. It's going to be very interesting to see what this guy can actually do in the UFC, if anything at all. You know, you have a lot of these guys that do have, 15, 20-plus wins that are now starting to come into the UFC. And, he did have a victory in UFC. He hasn't had a victory here in the UFC, so it'll be interesting to see how he does play, especially in front of his, his countrymen there in Brazil. So 28-year-old, I'm very interested in seeing how he does. I might have to order that fight pass just to see him.
Well, it's free, and they fixed the security issues, so no risk there. That's for sure. Man, I think that's going to wrap up our show. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye this week, man?
The main event, you didn't pick a winner.
Oh, I want to pick Mustasi, but he's been inactive, and I think Machida, he's got a knack for this guy does not care if he's boring, so I think Machida in a 5-round stinker, unfortunately.
Oh no, man! I know. I hope it ends early. I was a Mustasi fan for a really long time, and he's disappointed me his last few bouts. But
yeah,
I think Machida. There's no way Machida loses back-to-back fights in his home country.
Yeah, I agree, man.
So I'm going Machida on that one.
As long as Machida throws some spinning kicks and kind of does some entertaining stuff somewhat, even if it misses, the crowd will be fine and. He'll win a lackluster decision, and the fans will be happy. So,
Jay, I have a feeling that the only exciting thing about this fight is going to be his post-fight English-speaking congratulations or acceptance there.
It won't be in English. They're in Brazil.
Oh, he doesn't have to. If he tries in English, I'd love it, man, because he'll say some crazy, wild stuff when he does speak English, and he's full of excitement. So,
it's true.
Definitely. It's an okay card. If you rate it, it's a B minus. So,
yeah, you have the middleweight. As much as I don't like the two, as much as I do not like Garmon too much. He's technically ranked in the top 10, and 3 to 4 guys are ranked in the top 10. And Mustasi was a regular in the top 10 in the middleweight division. You can't really hate on this card too much, even though it doesn't really feature the big time names of that division.
No, and I completely agree with you. But nonetheless, just because that Rashad Evans fight fell through next week, I'm going to treat this all as one continuous fight card just to make up for that, man.
Yep, UFC 170 Part 1, 0.5.
Yeah, exactly.
So, man, that's going to wrap up our show. Again, you can get in touch with us through email, through lowblow505@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter through @thelowblow. Also, check out us, of course, on Stitcher, on Spreaker, and on iTunes. Of course, you can check out the Fight Fans Radio family on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. Check out southwestfight.com for that story that we discussed about Nick Urso fighting Ray Borg, the super fight. Check that story out. NM Combat Sports has a good story on Holly Holm, so go check them out, and go check out Fight Fans Radio on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. They have a great lineup of shows. And remember, this weekend, I promise I will put up the Austin Trout interview for your listening pleasure, discussing the black athletes in combat sports. A really good listen. Please go check that out this weekend. And, of course, next week we'll have the Bob Foster interview. We'll probably have it up sometime next week, so please be looking out for that. So for Jorge Hernandez, I'm Justin Goodrum. You've been listening to The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, southwestfight.com, and uscombatsports.com. We will see you next week.
Peace.